The sugar and carbs has screwed up your brain and caused addictive thinking and addictive behaviors.
The person that loses weight, gains it back, loses weight, gains it back. Do you see the same kind of cycle with addiction?
Once you're triggered and the craving takes over, other parts of the brain shuts off.
For those sugar fiends that are always wrestling their cravings, I've got a question for you. Do you think that you're addicted to sugar? And I don't mean, oh my God, like totally I'm addicted to sugar. I mean, have you been unable to say no to sugar and refined carb foods for many, many years, whilst your weight gain continued to increase and your health progressively deteriorated into things like obesity, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, brain fog, mental health issues, gut issues? The list goes on. Doctors have incorrectly regarded this group of people as lazy and stupid and have pathetically offered their terrible food pyramid plate advice of eat in a balanced, moderate way, which for addicts is like saying, just use heroin modestly for a few months and then we'll look at your results at your next appointment. If this sounds something like your story with food, then this episode is worth listening to because today's guest essentially founded sugar addiction as a legitimate addiction within medicine and built both the medical diagnostic tools to help patients understand it better, and she created the first holistic addiction protocols to help patients actually recover from sugar addiction. She also broke her own alcohol addiction 40 years ago and has been in recovery for her own sugar and carb addiction for the last 32 years. Sugar and carb addiction is real and needs to be taken seriously, and this podcast is a part of that vision. So let's get into it. What's up, my healthy friends? Great to have you here on today's podcast. This year, it's my mission to support 500 people to achieve real weight loss. And by real, I mean dealing with what's really weighing you down and not just the number on your scale. And today's conversation and today's podcast is extremely pertinent to the kinds of people that we support. So if you're thinking it might be time to do things in a very different way to what you've done in the past, scroll to the show notes or the caption below and book in a discovery call to check out some of our programs. Now, returning to us all the way from Sweden is the legendary Bitten Jonsson. And a quick bit about Bitten is that since 1973, she's been a registered nurse, and Bitten is the world's leading expert in sugar addiction. She's written 3 books, with one of the most well-known being The Sugar Bomb in Your Brain. Now, if you'd like to check out some of the conversations we've already had on here after you're finished on this episode, head back to episode 137 or 277, and of course, now this episode. So, Bitten, it's so great to have you back on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning from Sweden.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
Sweden.
A beautiful, beautiful spring morning over here.
Oh, well, it's a beautiful autumn afternoon where I am.
Yeah, I understand that. Yes.
So before we hit record, you were just telling me about your amazing history, and you've hit this 40-year milestone. So I'm wondering if you could start with what that 40-year milestone is and then continue us on with everything amazing that you've done in your career.
Well, my story, I've told that many, many times in different podcasts, but I was a nurse and working as a nurse and knew nothing about addiction. I couldn't even spell the word addiction, never heard of it. And in Sweden at that time, if you were drinking and hiding, lying, sneaking with that, you were a very bad person, low moral, you were absolutely horrible. So I was like everybody else, trying to control drinking and couldn't. Ended up in treatment in USA because I met an American, married, and moved over. The best thing that happened in my life, to be meeting professionals that taught me that addiction is a brain illness. And all the research with neurotransmitters and the brain and da-da-da-da-da. It was amazing. And it was a shock. And I was almost very angry too. Why hadn't anyone told me that before? In Sweden, it was such a shameful situation. So I decided, oh my goodness, now when I've learned this, I'm going to teach everybody else. You know what that is. And everybody else doesn't want to hear that. So anyway, I started out working. But the thing was that also I met some absolutely wonderful people like Terence Gorski, who became my mentor. And he was the world-leading relapse prevention specialist at that time. So I was just sucking up every lecture he had. I went over, did training with him twice. I had him over in Sweden doing training and so forth. So, and I thought, I'm going to be very healthy. So at that time, I was smoking. So I quit smoking, right? After 7 years in sobriety. And of course, I had no idea about what we call addiction interaction disorder, one illness, many outlets. So, and nobody talked about sugar and carbs and food, and fat people were lazy, stupid, sort
Mhm.
of low moral and no character and that forth. So anyway, and I wasn't really overweight. I had some weight. But so I thought I quit smoking. And that was absolutely totally crazy because I could die for chocolate and ice cream. Now I was acting like an addict, but with those things. And I thought, this is crazy. And I started thinking, what is wrong? I could quit smoking, I could quit alcohol, but I can't quit sugar and carbs.
Mm.
What is absolute? I try it every day, and it was absolutely a nightmare. So, and then I started talking about it. And then I ended up in US again. I was living back in Sweden at that time. So I ended up in Chicago at this hospital where they were helping, as they said, food addicts. But I want to point out one thing. I know that most people use the word food addiction. I don't like that. And I tell you why. Nobody would say about alcoholism or alcohol liquid addiction.
Mm.
Like I would have a liquid addiction. Oh, wait a minute. Water is not addictive. It's not a psychoactive substance. So I have, through all these years, kept saying sugar addiction because when I ask people, do you have a problem with food? They said, nah, not food really. Well, what about sugar and that type of food? Oh, yeah, tell me about it. They do this. Oh, my goodness. So and if you're an addiction specialist, which I am, you understand what psychoactive substance is. Okay, alcohol is a psychoactive substance, water is not, right?
Yeah.
So, and also food, I like to keep the word food for real food. What we need, what we thrive on, what makes us healthy. So that's why I say sugar and carbs. Because
Mhm.
if you look at meat is not addictive. Plain
Yeah.
meat is not addictive. Plain, pure fat is not addictive, the good fats, and so on. So it is about sugar and carbs. That's what trigger our reward center. So anyway, I understood the sugar and everything. So I got into training with that. And I came home to Sweden after a few weeks over there and I started telling people about it. I said, hi, I'm a sugar addict. And they looked at me like I came from March or something. What are you talking about? This was 1992. And yeah, but I tried to explain. Nobody listened. I said, no, 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 you can't be addicted to that. I said, yeah, you can. But then people started ringing me. I said, hey, wait a minute. You know what? I'm like a foodaholic. That's a word they used in the beginning. We had so
Mm.
few words and we didn't have any research and we knew so little. But people that couldn't stop eating were viewed very poorly, very bad. Sharp up, eat
Yeah.
less, move more. And then these people came to me, and I started to teach them a little bit of the little I knew at that time, right? But sharing my story. And then after that, I said, okay, let's start a group. So I did. I had no material, no nothing. But I knew from US, the treatment center I was in, they had a program for alcohol, pills, and drugs. And I thought, drug as a drug. So I started working with that. So that was 1993, 94. And I met Terence Gorski, my mentor for many years. And he was a relapse prevention specialist. Because if you go to the gas station, there's no bottles with whiskey there or no cocaine bowls, but there's food, right? Sugars,
Yeah.
sugars, sugars, bakery, da da da. So we are exposed so terribly. So I started to talk about it more and more, and people said, "But that's me. That's me. That's how I act. I can't. I start eating. I take one bite of a cinnamon roll, and I can't stop, and then I go on and eat this and that, and so forth." And yeah, that's my story. So that's the way it was. So we started talking about these things. In 95, I started the first group. I put together a program for one whole day every week for 20 weeks. And we started to learning together. Nobody talked about insulin at that time. Nobody talked about, all we knew was reward center. Something happened in our brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had loss of control. So that's when my story started. And then from there, people said to me, hey, I can't only come 1 day a week. I need to stay here. I need to get a few weeks for this. So I said, oh, I better get some beds and put people in some beds. But the thing that hit me during all these people that looked for me and I started exploring their story was how horrible the doctors and nurses treated them. That was started ringing in me. They viewed them as they didn't even want to help people with overweight because they said you're a hopeless case. It's such poor track record of people losing weight. People lose weight and then they gain weight. They lose weight and they gain weight. So they wanted the whole medical profession was behaving horrible. Still do, Matt. They don't know anything about addiction. They can't fathom that your brain is hijacked by certain food products.
Yeah.
So that is the horrible thing. And that's why I was fighting so hard. And I had a tremendous amount of resistance from the medical profession. But being a medical professional, I wanted to really teach my peers because those are my tribe, my pack. But they
Yeah.
were the worst. And the social office, which helped people with alcohol and pills and drugs, they said, no, we don't help people with eating disorder. And I said, this is not an eating disorder. This is a sugar and carb addiction. And they said, no, that doesn't exist. They still do here. So people that coming to me told me such horrible stories, what the doctors have said to them, how the nurses treated them, looking down upon them, and all that. So my dream was all the time, ooh, I wish I could take every doctor and nurse, put them on a deserted island, and force feed them knowledge. That's how I felt. I was very upset with my colleagues behaving in that way.
Yeah.
And many still do. So, right now, if we look at that whole history, I've had so much ridicule from the press or from other doctors, nurses, professionals, nutritionists, blah, 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 blah. And if you look at the whole field, there are so many names for having a eating problem,
Yeah.
It's binge eating, it's overeating, it's restricting, anorexia, bulimia, purging, volume eating, blah, blah, blah. I have a slide with a long list of names. And of course, each professional have their little piece of understanding, and then they have a method. Eat in moderation. Try this, liquid diets, this diet. And we know that many people do the bariatric surgery, and that's a temporary solution. They lose weight, but they become very sick in the end. So I was pushing through. And in the meantime, I thought, well, we need to marry people in the integrative functional medicine field because they understand more lifestyle medicine. Because the medical field, they were one meal, one pill, right?
Yes.
So I set out to talk to people that were naturopathic doctors and integrative functional medicine specialists, orthomolecular specialists. And this I did many years ago. And they started listening, although many of them still didn't understand loss of control and hijacked brain, which is the key issue to understand. So they came up with other remedies, pills and powders and drops and all that. And of course, that didn't help. And still the moderation eating, which of course not, it's like eating on drinking on an alcoholic, or you can't say to somebody addicted to heroin, well, maybe you could have a little bit of heroin on Friday evenings for work.
Such a funny
But
example.
That's what they did, and that's what they do. They still do. So anyway, because they don't go into depth understanding how our body get hijacked. And today we know much more. So anyway, and then this journalist asked me, how come you're pushing, talking about this when people think you are fanatic or a lunatic or there is no such thing as sugar and carb addiction? And I know the resistance you're meeting here. And I looked at him and said, I was thinking, why do I keep doing this? Because I'm right. That was my answer at that time. And I know I'm right. So there is such thing. Sugar addiction is real. And I had all those hundreds and thousands of people keep coming to me and said, help me, I'm dying. And the whole field is looking at the consequences of the addiction. Obesity and overweight is a consequence. High blood pressure is a consequence. Inflammation is a consequence. Diabetes is a consequence. I could go on and on and on.
It's the typical nature of Western medicine, right? To
Yeah, but
look
right.
at the symptoms rather
Yeah,
than the root cause.
yeah, the consequences. And also, I understand why, because there is nothing more difficult in the world to tell somebody that is in the throes of addiction: eat less, move more, don't eat cakes, but eat bread, eat this moderation, because every bite triggers the addiction and makes it absolutely impossible to stick to a diet, right? So that's why I pushed through. And so 95 was the first more professional group
Mm-hmm.
treatment. And then people came and said, oh, you got to keep me for a couple of weeks. I can't do this in one day a week. And people traveled from all over Sweden to come to that group. And it didn't work. Night train and doing one day and night train back. And I had people doing that. So anyway, I thought, oh, I better rent a few beds. I
Yeah.
did. And that's how it started, actually. And people came and wanted to stay for a couple of weeks and then 4 weeks and then aftercare. So that's how I built the treatment that I did. And we were learning together because there was so little. But anyway, my dream was always to get the doctors and the nurses who was the people that met these people in the GP's office. They came and tried to ask for help and they were brushed off,
Mm.
brushed off. Go home and eat less and do this and take this pill or this powder or this diet or this and that.
They still recommend that in many GP clinics.
I know, because they don't have knowledge.
Yeah.
So through all these years, anytime a doctor or a nurse or a dietitian, any of the medical professionals came to me and said, can you tell me what you're doing? What are you talking about? They were at least a little curious. And they also saw what happened to the clients when they came to me instead of going to their office. I had one psychiatrist calling me and said, very stern, and he was like, we have a common client. And I said, her name? And I said, yeah, we do. And he said, what are you doing to her? And at first my heart sank and I thought, my goodness, I hope that she's not dead or something. And he thinks I did it. But at that time, everything was so strange.
Yeah.
So I said, well, she's been at my place for help with her sugar and carb addiction. And he said, oh, so there is such thing. And he said, why do you ask? I asked him. Well, she was coming to my office and I put the diagnosis borderline on her. And you and I know that borderline is not really, it's very treatment resistant. It's like a early psycho disturbance and so, or whatever we're going to call it. But, they don't really recover. They can learn a lot of stuff to deal with life pretty good, but they don't really recover. So he said to me, she has been away from my office for 4 years. She came back to me now. And I must say, she doesn't have a borderline. And I said, And I said, but depression and bipolar and anxiety and all those diagnoses are a consequence of an untreated sugar and carb addiction.
Wow.
Because sugar and carb addiction really screws up your brain and your body.
Yeah.
And he said, interesting, I must say. So anyway, stuff like that happened. And I thought, why isn't doctors and nurses and medical professionals coming to the training? Because they said, no, I don't want to deal with that because they are hopeless cases. And of course, what they saw was that these people tried again and again and again to heal, to go into recovery, to start working a good program, but they relapsed. And they didn't understand, first of all, sugar and carbs, that's the first psychoactive substance anyone encounter as a toddler, as a baby, through their life. Nobody starts drinking when they are 3, 4 years old
Yeah.
or using drugs. That comes later in the teenage years, right? So exposure for those psychoactive substances are much later, but
Mm.
sugar and carbs. And then they didn't understand the genetic predisposition that people have. So if you have a sensitivity for addiction of some kind, it's back in your family or back way back in generations, somebody have this, you are a sitting duck if you start eating these products, because then it can explode and become an addiction. So anyway, the exposure is very early. Keep that in mind when we look
Mhm.
at it.
Our plan with our little guy is to try and do the first 1,000 days of his life entirely sugar carb free.
This sounds wonderful. Keep going as long as you can, because he's going to be exposed to the society and he's going to start wanting that. So, but because remember that the prefrontal cortex of the brain is not developed when you're born. The
Mm.
part of the brain that is already developed is the reptilian brain. What's in your reptilian brain? Well, that's instinct for survival,
Yeah.
fight, flight, freeze, food, and sex. You are hardwired, already born, that part of the brain. But the prefrontal cortex, where you learn how to behave in life, where many of your skills as a growing human being developing, is not ready until when I started training, they said it's matured when you're 20. But you know how kids and teenagers can be, and that's part of growing up, right? They are rowdy and all over the place, but that's what life is. But then later on, I learned from science that the prefrontal cortex is probably not matured until you're 25. And I
Mm.
thought, that's interesting. They changed it. More research showed better result. Fine. A few years ago, some researchers said in Oxford, they said, well, it's probably not matured until you're 30. And now it's getting interesting. Why is that? Were
Mm.
we so wrong in the beginning, or could something hinder development? Well, for the
That's a good
later.
perspective.
Yes, yeah. That's my theory. Malnutrition hinders the brain to develop. So if you do give nutritionless food to a toddler and a baby, and of course the brain going to develop much slower, and also it's going to be very hampered in its
Yeah.
development. You get the wrong connections, and you get places where it's not connected in the
Mhm.
brain. And I read a lot today about the egotistical generation today. They are so
Yeah.
selfish.
Yes.
All they want to do is eat and sit with the mobile phone. So now we have problem number two, the screens.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely
This is
agree.
going to hinder a proper development of a child. And can you imagine then? You don't get sufficient nourishment and you'll be on a screen day and night.
Hmm.
Which part of your brain going to be developed? Reptilian brain.
Yes.
Yeah, fight, flight, freeze, sex, and food.
Mm.
So that's what's happening. This
That's
is what
so
happened.
interesting.
So anyway, but my colleagues, they were not really listening. So you asked me what's happening in your life. Well, I finally have some professionals listening. And that's the first one that started doing that was Professor Timothy Noakes in South
Yeah.
Africa,
He's incredible.
Nutrition Network, and Noakes Foundation.
Hmm.
And I remember him saying a few years ago, after I've been doing some training for them, and he said, sugar addiction is probably the most hidden, unknown problem underlying today's health problems. And
Yeah.
he's right, because they were still seeing the top layer, the consequences.
Hmm.
And now they can see what's underlying this. Well, if I'm a doctor and I treat the client for high blood pressure and diabetes or inflammation or the other consequences, the depression, the anxiety, but I don't address the addiction, which is loss of control, again,
Hmm.
hijacked brain, I'm not going to help this client. They're going to be a little bit better for a while, and then they're going to go back and a
Hmm.
little bit better and go back. And somebody that is doing that, you can imagine if you were trying a treatment method and you kept failing, how would you feel? How
Yeah,
would
not
that
good at
make
all.
you feel? No, you would think something is wrong with you. You would
Oh,
think
absolutely.
that everybody else can do it. I am the loser. I am the bad one. I can't even make this method or this diet or this what. So people feel more and more like losers. And then finally, they stop going to the healthcare professionals and they start looking online and they get into really crazy remedies, the starving diets and even more diets. And they start doing low carb by themselves, not knowing anything how the body reacts. So they relapse. And then they go, well, I try keto. And they have no knowledge. Nobody teaches them about the brain, how that is working, or the reptilian little sucker sitting there screaming at you, eat, 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 because it's overactivated from the addiction.
Hmm.
And then what's more going to happen, and you know this, well, your pancreas is going to be overactivated, right? So
Yeah.
now it's going to start squirting insulin, and you have insulin resistance. And I'm not going to go into all the details there, but this is very important to understand. It starts with a reward system reacting to sugar and carbs in these sensitive people. I'm one of them.
Hmm.
And then we want more of that and more and more. So now our reptilian brain going to say, "Ooh, yeah, huh, now we're going eat more, eat till you die." And you try to, it's like stopping a tsunami with your hands. It's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
Because it's overactivated. The whole brain is hampered in its development and overactivated because it starts early. And
Hmm.
then you have a pancreas that is overactivated. And now the whole hormonal system is screwed up. Your brain is screwed up. It's not functioning properly. And you get something we call foggy brain. Georgia Ede has a very good name, cerebral glucose hypometabolism, if you want a fancier name. But I said foggy brain. You don't function. You can't overview things. You don't connect the dots. That is the problem. So that's why I call the work I do now, and years back, I came up with the term hashtag connect the dots between. So first I married the functional medicine people, and now I'm marrying the metabolic syndrome people.
Hmm.
I get to do some training in Nutrition Network and Noakes Foundation. And now they are the leaders in saying we're changing one professional at a time, medical professional at a time, teaching this as part of everything else they teach about health and
Yeah.
lifestyle medicine. So actually, I could quit now because my dream is true. I have medical professionals listening.
That's
But
incredible that you've achieved that goal.
yeah, yeah, I'm very happy. But there are few, but they're coming along and they make it as a natural part of their training
Mm.
to understand addiction and the disease concept. It is a brain illness with
Hmm.
physical, psychological, social, and spiritual consequences.
Hmm.
You know, it's not those consequences are not 30 diagnoses as the traditional medical system see it. And there are no pills and quick fixes for that. The way to recover, you have to take away the drug. The
Hmm.
only way to recover and heal is to take away the psychoactive substance, which is sugar and carbs,
Hmm.
and eat real food. And also, the sugar and carbs has screwed up your brain and caused addictive thinking and addictive behaviors. So all these years you've been eating this and been on and off, on and off. Your brain is not functioning properly. So it's nothing that you can heal in 3 weeks. It takes years. It takes
Yeah.
many, many years to rewire the brain and develop the brain with proper nutrition and lifestyle. So it's a whole, I used to say, the food part, changing food
Mm.
and doing what I call biochemical repair, which is so important to restore energy. So you have energy to do the rest of the work
Yeah.
with proper sleep and breathing and physical activity and supplements. That's about 10% of the whole treatment process.
Hmm.
40% is relapse prevention. Because think about it. I talked about the early exposure Now you have constant exposure. Gas station. I went to it's not a new, an old, but new grocery store yesterday, and I was so depressed. I had to call my best friend. She's in the field, Annika Strandberg Schmidt, and I said, I need to complain. Listen to me. I was looking for plastic bags, 3 liter plastic bags. And I
Yeah.
was walking the aisles up and down, because they had rebuilt in there. And I thought, where have they put cleaning supply? I found it at the corner, a small stretch, just a few shelves where it was. But you know what I saw?
What?
Energy drinks, long aisles full with energy drinks and crisps and candy and all that. It was huge. I wish I could measure in percentage how big that was compared to the rest in the store. I
Yeah.
almost fainted. I had no idea it's been that sick.
Hmm.
It was sickening. I felt so bad, and I thought, because we know that craving comes from seeing it, all those colored cans with drinks and crisps and all that hits. If you're an addict, you're going to react to that by seeing it, smelling it, hearing it, pop a can, that's a trigger sound. And this is, what life is all about today. All those ales with all that junk, drug
Mm.
foods. So it's very hard to try to resist. And you need a lot of help, a lot of knowledge, a lot of support. So 40% is about relapse prevention. We have to teach that from day one. What is a risk situation? When you are new into recovery, first weeks, everything trigger you. So we advise you, don't go to the grocery store alone, because
Mm.
you're going to be triggered.
Yep.
And once you're triggered and the craving takes over, other parts of the brain shuts off. It's like a crocodile seeing a person on the beach. Ooh, I'm going to get you. Focus, focus.
Yeah. Yeah. People often talk about that cognitive dissonance that happens when they
Yes,
have a binge,
yes,
and it's like, it was like an out of body experience.
yes. So that starts in the grocery store. So if you're new into recovery, first years, your brain is extremely sensitive. So when a craving, which is a physical thing, starting in your brain, you can't resist it. You're
Hmm.
like missile looking for the target going. And so that is society. The food industry knows this. So that's why they do what they do with the baked goods in front of the kids and the candies and all the colors. And it made me so sad. I was thinking, how is this going to end? How is this going to end? Well,
One of the things that the whole world looks to is the EU and the countries in Europe in regards to their food laws. And so I'm curious, in comparison to like the USA, which is probably the worst situation or the worst example in the world for food laws and sugar and supermarkets and all that kind of thing. Do you feel like in the EU, the laws are going to protect the European population, or is it starting to go the other way? Are they moving in the direction of the USA?
well, in Sweden at least, and in EU, they know about this. They do understand it, but they keep the quiet treatment.
Mm.
No, everybody pretends they don't know anything about it, and the
Mm.
food industry is running the whole show.
Yeah, same here.
And you can't deprive people, Maddie, by
Deprive them.
forbidding something or taking it away. And all I see when I go to the grocery store shopping is all these incredible sick people,
Yeah.
overweight sick people. And I know that the healthcare system is about to break. And actually, it has broken, because the government is trying to cut down on healthcare because it costs too much. Oh, wait
Mm.
a minute, stop. Why does it cost too much? Well, because you are using the wrong methods of helping people. The word lifestyle medicine is unheard of in Sweden. What's that?
Wow.
And the medical profession thinks too that, well, people don't do as I tell them. Well, 15 minutes, you're huge overweight, you're depressed, you have foggy brain, eat less and move more. How's that going to help anyone?
It
Nobody
doesn't.
does the assessment. I developed the sugar diagnostic assessment to help people see this is the disease you have, this is the illness.
Mm-hmm.
This is how your life look with all these ups and downs in weight and illness, more and more consequences the older you have gotten and so forth. This is going to end with a disaster if we don't turn this table. And then you have to take away the food. And then the 50% of the treatment method, if we're going to go back to that, is support. Because once you have developed this, as I call, the red dog monster, the addictive part of your brain, which is not you, by the way, you have an illness, you are not your illness. But that thing that said, wow, shouldn't we eat some today? Maybe I can buy that just a little bit, just for today, only one. This time I'm going to control it. Sure, babe, you're not going to control it. The drug controls you. If you
Yes,
take one bite,
absolutely.
you're screwed. But anyway, so there is no support for changing the lifestyle. And people have asked me through the years, when are you going to be normal? Why don't you eat normal? And I said, I'm the normal one. You're not.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
But I have many years in this field, so I can be pretty tough when people criticize me. But we are called fanatics, eccentrics. Why do we eat like this? Why don't we eat normal? Why can't you have a little bit? Compare it to if you're a peanut allergic and you die from a peanut, could you have half a peanut? No, you
It's a
can't.
good
But you
comparison.
don't want to understand. Anyway, support is very important, that we have people around us like-minded that we can talk to. Oh, today my red dog wants to eat chocolate all day long. But of course, I'm not going to do it. How do you withstand the craving? What do you do instead? We have a huge toolbox today to help people that's been developed through all these years with all the treatment I've worked with and all the people, the other professionals I married, as I said, making a holistic model.
Mm-hmm.
So the important thing is that we support each other to do the necessary changes. It's one thing to teach somebody, this is what you need to do. It's another thing to do it every day, day after day. Sometimes that's like a desert walk. People
Yeah.
feel, oh, I have no energy, I have no mental horsepower, I'm so tired. But the remedy is knowledge. Knowledge is power. If I didn't know so much about addiction, I would never been alive today, because that's
Yeah,
what's
wow.
kept me all these years to understand how my brain was rewired, faulty wired, and the tools I need to rewire it again, to heal it. Because it's in your brain, every thought, every behavior you have learned will never go away. So the addictive part of your brain will be there forever. So, how do you get out of that? Well, you do brain bypass. You learn new things, bypassing the old behavior, old thoughts, old feelings, and so on. And you learn to do new things. And then you have to be like an athlete. You have to practice every day for years, every day. And that can be sometimes, oh, how am I going to do this? But then you have your peers. And they said, well, I used to be there a year ago. And today it feels like this because I kept practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I learned this new tool and this tool, and like the conscious breathing tool that I learned many years ago. You've probably seen me using this relaxator. I love it. And I teach everybody how to do conscious breathing and use a relaxator, because all the addicts overbreathe.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at them, they go. So that is really ruining the whole biochemistry in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So I teach them about breathing, proper breathing, how to practice that every day. Nose breathing, slow the breathing down, exhale for longer than inhale, and so forth. It's such a simple thing. I teach people that in 1 minute on the screen like this. And I tell them, start practicing. And of course, the body will slow down. Reptilian brain is high active. It's like a speed freak. It's
Yeah.
like a Ferrari on cocaine type thing. So you have to slow the reptilian brain down in order for you to the new lifestyle with the new food, the breathing, the better sleep, the physical activity, support for you to take in those tools. If you have a high active reptilian brain, it's not going to listen. No, no,
Yeah.
no. The next thing, the next diet, the next this. So people become, of course, from eating junk food, which I still like to call it, they become very tired and wired because the sugar and carbs give you false energy for a little time and then you crash. So
Yeah.
it's you are both wired and tired. And that's a horrible feeling because it's like spinning all the time. You don't get anything done. You don't go forward. You run in circles and nothing happens. So that's why the first thing is to really slow everything down. If you are an exercise addict, we recommend that you slow down. You can't keep doing that. Most
Mm.
people don't. They are terrified or they don't like to exercise because they are overweight, they are in pain, inflammation, poor sleep. The mitochondria is shut down, it's not working. So we
Yeah.
have to hear that first. But this is the message that I want to give to people that if you think you have, and there are screening instruments on my website, bittensaddiction.com, and if you see that you have a problem, if you see, oh my goodness, I said yes to many of those answers, you need help. We ask for professionals with our new fancy cards. We don't try to repair them ourselves. We ask for help with many, many things, but it's like this deep inside the illness, the red dog, as I call it, the monster, wants to tell us, you have to fix this yourself. But you can't. That's like that's holding a Pilates ball under the water. It's going to bounce up in your face before you know it. So you need a professional to tell you this is the picture of you in your life right now. They need to do a sugar diagnostic, which is an instrument I developed many years ago, which is absolutely brilliant. It's very powerful. It gives you all the insight you need. Sometimes when we talk, I should demonstrate it to you and you should see. Maybe I can do it on you. And
Yeah.
you'll be
Yeah.
baffled when you see your life story folding out there. I said, I had no idea.
Yeah. Oh, I'm curious with those diagnostic tools. I know that there's a classification for harmful use of sugar and refined carbs and addiction. What's the distinguishing factor between those two groups?
Good question. While WHO, World Health Organization, still is keeping the terminology harmful use and then addiction, they have both. American Psychiatric Association that is doing DSM-5 today. We had DSM-3, 4, 5 through the years I worked, versions of it. They took away that and they have another legend of it today, explanation that if you have symptoms in 2 to 3 criteria, it's a mild addiction, which is a stupid word because you can't have a mild addiction. That's like saying I'm a little bit pregnant. Either you are or you're not. But it is in the early stages, or you're full of denial and pain. You can't see it. And then moderate and then severe. The harmful users, the definition is that you're not addicted. But those are the emotional eaters, the stress eaters, the culture eaters. Those are the ones eating wrong because they don't know, because they are stressed and unhappy or whatever. But when you start looking at them with the diagnostic tool, you can see that they don't have the loss of control as an addict. So it could be early addiction too. I am never treated harmful users because to me that's boring. I love the addicts. I want to work with the hardcore stuff.
Yeah.
But there is a terminology of all the people that asked for my help through the years. Everybody wants to be a harmful eater because that means moderation and dealing with the problem, like the stress or the emotions or thoughts or whatever, what have you. But of course, out of 1,000 clients, maybe one would be a harmful eater. The rest
Yeah.
are addicts, and they don't want to be addicts, but that's the way truth is.
Yeah.
So you need help because I say, like Churchill, the further back you look, the further forward you can go. So you
Yeah.
need take a gutsy look at your situation and the truth, the reality. And most people, when we do sugar on them and they see black and white, well, actually, the curve is yellow and gray. Weight curve is gray and the dots are yellow. We look at the curve and we see this is the way your life is right now. And these are all the consequences through all these years. And your first addictive symptom was when you were 3, 4, 5 years old. And here you are. And the weight has gone up and down and up and down. And they have done bariatric surgery. It didn't help. They gained it all back again, and so forth. And all the consequences. They cry from relief. They cry and say, oh, this is what I said to myself. I understood that I'm addict. But people around me say there is no such thing as a sugar carb addiction, because it's so scary. If somebody is an addict, what do you do about it? Oh, I don't know what to do about it. So let's pretend it doesn't exist. Stupid.
Yeah.
The ostrich in the sand. And of course, things get worse and worse. So that's why I do the sugar diagnostic, the full assessment, which is pretty comprehensive. And I help people see reality because, as I said, if you don't see reality, you don't know where you're going.
Mm.
It's going to be a new method, a new diet, something that's only going to temporarily halt something. And then you're back into it and even worse. And if you look at people that have lost a lot of weight, but they haven't gotten into recovery, or they don't understand they have a sugar and carb addiction, what's happening to them? They gain it all back and more.
Yeah.
So you can just look out there.
I'm curious because we often see this, or not often, we see this a lot, which is just as you're describing, the person that loses weight, gains it back, loses weight, gains it back. And people often do this for 3, 4 decades before they start looking for a solution that's not the same kind of cycle. But do you see the same kind of cycle with addiction? Because isn't the step to remove the addiction very sudden and immediate? So is there a lot of relapse in the beginning of addiction recovery?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially with food, due to what I told you earlier, early exposure, the brain is not developed. So it's worse mental horsepower. You have to develop the brain too and stay away from the food. And then the constant exposure that you have with food, sugar and carbs, that you don't have with alcohol and cocaine and other drugs. So even alcoholics and drug addicts and pill addicts, they relapse. But it's much further to getting a drink for somebody in recovery than it is to grab a piece of chocolate or a cookie or a cake.
Yeah.
That's very close. So it's much, much more obvious with people with food. And also another thing is that you have a society that don't understand, don't respect this. You can have a little, be normal, have a cookie. Ugh. So we are exposed to much more nagging and much more. And so many people are sugar and carb addicted today. And if I quit, you're threatening my eating. So I don't want you to quit, because then you're going to be a goody goody. Oh, that's horrible. Which to eat this, and you could have a little, eat with me, eat with me. So you have the whole society's ignorance and silence and don't change. And the early exposure, the constant exposure, the food industry is absolutely drowning you in an exposure and all that. So with the reason that we need to learn about craving management, cue-induced craving, when it comes to the sugar and carb part, is extremely important. Anyone working with this, not understanding cue-induced craving, the physical reaction that has nothing with your will to do when you are exposed. Even people talking about it, oh, I'm going to go home and bake a cake. That trigger a sugar and carb addict in the beginning. So, of course, the person that have this problem, they need a huge, huge toolbox and support to handle all this. I went to the store today and I saw all this chocolate and my brain started wiring up. You can talk to somebody. One of the best remedies I've learned through the years is to expose my red dog to my peer support group, tell them about it, and that would take away the craving. If I pretend it didn't happen or lie or hide, it's going to grow on me. And maybe I eat chocolate 3 days from now. So I don't even connect it with going to the store yesterday.
So it's important to share that with people so that you can release a pressure valve
Exactly,
within
Maddie.
you.
Exactly.
Is it equally important to make confessions when you do eat? Like
Of course,
for someone?
honesty. Yeah, the
Yeah.
program is about honesty. And people call me and I see them. They relapsed a year or two back, and it shocks me every time. And they said, well, I felt shame starting to eat again. And then what's happening is that the drug is screwing up your brain.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. It's like a toxic, a poison. So you think, well, I had this today, but I'm going to quit tomorrow. I'm going
Hmm.
to quit tomorrow. And 1 year goes and 2 year goes, and you become
Yeah.
sicker and sicker and sicker. So
Yeah.
you have to, in the treatment program, you build in the support group. It
Yeah.
is a must. It is as important as quitting the drug. So
Mm.
that's why, 10% biochemical repair in the food, 40% relapse prevention, and we have relapse groups
Hmm.
so that we stops, we map out what are my risk situations, what are my warning signs. I know that. So, I know what to do about it. And then I have the support group. Oh, the desert walk here. And then these people treated me bad today. And there's somewhere to release all that. So that's
Yeah.
why it's important to have that whole concept.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean, yeah, the work that you do is so phenomenal. And I'm such a fan of everything that you've
Thank
created and to be, yeah, just a part of the group of practitioners that get to learn from you. And what I love too is that you embody it. You've been 40 years sober. How many years you've taken that step with sugar and refined carbs?
Well, since, the first food plans that I shared this with Vera Tarman, we have a pod out, a
Hmm.
recent pod. It's going to be on my website where I talk about how the food plans looked in the beginning when we had no knowledge about insulin, or we had fruit in the food plan, grains, but they were brown rice, right? Like, is that would be better for us? No, no, no. We had lots of carbs, but we took away the really bad part. And starchy veg, we had that in the beginning. So I used to say I started working on my food recovery for 32 years ago when I
Wow.
started to have knowledge, but my food plan has changed through the years. So if you listen to that podcast with Dr. Vera Tarman and me, she's interviewing me, we tell about how our knowledge, but we didn't know anything about insulin at that time. So today, my food plan, we've gone from that carby, fruity, sweety with dairy products to a much stricter keto food plan with all the knowledge I have today about insulin and the body. So uh, in periods, I used to say I eat a keto carnivore,
Hmm.
because I was very young when I started, and I'm going to be 73 this year. So my body has what's called reverse tolerance too. That's something we develop. The older I get, the more sluggish. Or it's not, somewhere I read, well, we don't only get wrinkles in our face, we get wrinkles on the intestines and in our bodies. And everything is wrinkled in my body. Everything is older and more sluggish. So, I need to expose my body to less food, to less food groups. Fruit would trigger me. If I eat an apple, I probably would run to the store and rob them of the chocolate cakes, because that's going to trigger my brain. Fruit is
Yeah.
sugar. So I've learned so much. So it's hard to say there was a date. Like with alcohol, I
Yeah.
can give you a date, 27th of September, 1985. I haven't
Hmm.
been drinking one drip after that. But with food, it's been a process.
Hmm.
So, but I've been in recovery. I have done some beautiful relapses, which I'm very grateful for. When I went into menopause, for instance, when I was 48, I could have drowned in chocolate, and it scared me terrible. And then I had some other relapses later on, and I said to a lady I worked with, I said, I'm going to quit working in this field. Why? People love when you teach them this. You can't stop working with sugar and carb addiction. I said, yeah, I have to, because I can't stick to being drug free in it. And she looked at me laughing and she said, but wait a minute. If you don't relapse, if you don't understand to work with relapse, like Gorski taught me, it's part of the journey. How can you
Yeah.
help people in relapse? You can't help people in relapse. And I looked at her and said, oh my God, okay, I'm going to stick to it.
That's such a good perspective to have been
Yeah, it
given.
is. It is. I love that. So today I work a lot with relapse prevention, and I work with CNAPS Corporation. I teach in their webinars and in their training, and they teach people from me
Hmm.
to develop relapse, because the relapse prevention protocol still is for alcohol, pills, and drugs, right?
Yeah.
And I have revised Terry's protocol for food, sugar, and carbs.
Hmm.
So it's the same thing. It's a psychoactive substance, and you have to take it away if you want to heal and you need support, you need knowledge, you need relapse prevention, blah, blah, blah. You need the huge toolbox with what do I do? What do I do? And also working with peers in a solution focused way. Like
Hmm.
if you and I were in a group and I had to go to a situation where I feel, oh my God, I might relapse there. I ask you, Matt, have you done this? And you said, yeah, sure. How did you do it? And you would tell me, well, if it was my problem and is my problem, I would do this. And I ask maybe somebody more. There's a whole world of knowledge out there. People have done what you're about to do long before you. They learned.
Yeah.
They can tell you what to do. So
Yeah.
that's how we work.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, and for anybody that wants to know more about you, get your books, get into this work, where can
Well,
they find you online?
Well, the best thing is to go to bittensaddiction.com, and then you can go to my Facebook, you could go to LinkedIn, you could go to Instagram and X. My books is still in Swedish, but one is almost translated and updated, but it seems never get done because remember the galaxy I told you about? I keep adding on other projects and having fun
Yeah.
with that, but it will be done. But then you could do that. And also, people email me after every podcast, and there is a lot of podcasts on my website if you go there. So it's Bitten and S, which word shall we use? Which is
For the
sure.
S,
The word,
sure.
sure. Bitten,
Sally, that's
sure,
a common one.
addiction, one word.com. So it's easy.
Bitten's
You can
Addiction.
Google and you find me.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes down below as well,
Yeah,
so everybody will be able to
yeah.
scroll and click.
Sure. But if you email me, I get you the link to where you can ask for help. I have trained so many. That's why I train professionals so
Hmm.
that people can get help. So there are people on my website that help others, professionals. So
Yeah,
there is
fantastic.
help. There is help.
And what before we finish, what is one piece of health information in your amazing career that you wish more people knew about?
Ask for help and be honest. Tell how it is, because that's when you get the help. There was a saying in a book once, she or he who cannot howl cannot find his or her pack. Learn to howl.
Oh, I love that. That's a
Yeah, I
good
love that
soundbite
too.
right there.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah,
Oh, Bitten, thank you so much for your time, your
thank you.
energy, your work. I love our conversations and
Yeah,
absolutely got to have you back.
yeah, good. I'm happy to come back, and for the work you do. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much.